Hi, Max Vaughn here, author of Faer. Today I'm going to talk about Blue Ocean Strategy, which is the name of a book I read. It's actually a business book, but I feel like some of the principles in that book really are helpful towards finding an original voice in writing. And so I'm going to just discuss that a little bit. I have a copy of the book here, Blue Ocean Strategy. You can look this up on Amazon. It is a business book. It compares several businesses and talks about how they developed a unique strategy for winning in the market. And I'd encourage you to read it. You know, it's not a writing book on technique, but it is something interesting. You know, writing's your own little business and your own little empire, and this will give you ideas on how to make it different and unique. If that is something you're interested in, some writers just want to follow a more commercial path and formulas, and that's fine too. I'm not really going in that direction, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about how Blue Ocean Strategy really helped me find my own unique voice. Okay, so one of the main ideas in the Blue Ocean Strategy book is that you create something new by taking something existing and add and subtract from it. You know, it's a pretty easy concept. One example they use in the book is Cirque du Soleil, and they added and subtracted elements to kind of make their offering unique. Example would be animals. That was a subtraction. They didn't want the expense. Circuses run very high overhead to have circus animals, and they decided that wasn't going to be part of their thing. Another thing was a change they made was that circuses were previously oriented just to children or family entertainment, and they took it more into an adult space, more of like an evening out. So those are a couple of the changes that Cirque du Soleil made to their circus format that made them different from Ringling Brothers Circus that was, you know, the dominant force in the market for them. And so I kind of think of like epic fantasy along the same lines. Like, how can I do something a little different? You know, add some things, subtract some things, make my fiction just a little bit different than everything else that's out there. So that's what we're looking at here. In terms of subtractions, and I'm just going to talk in general terms here because I don't want to give spoilers away to the books. I really hate doing that. Maybe someday when the books are read and, you know, people are discussing them and everyone knows what's in them, then I'll do that. But for now, I'm going to stay away from doing that. But I can talk about some structural things, and one of those would be like the length of the books. In epic fantasy, and you get a lot of long books. It could be 800 pages long. I think Game of Thrones is 800 and something pages long. I chose to go in a different direction. I wanted to constrain the page count. You know, 65,000 words gets you somewhere around 240 pages. I thought that was right for the choices that I was making, which is shorter stories that moved along at a really rapid pace that then the next book would take you somewhere else. You know, so that was a change I decided to make, and it might not be the most popular decision because readers do like some of those long books. I just thought for me it wouldn't work out well, and also the ability to produce more work or more books faster. I thought that was really key. So that kind of factored into my decision making there as well. My epic fantasy is not quest focused. That begs the question, what is it focused on? And a simple way of looking at that might be power structures, you know, who's in charge, who owns the land, and the battles that are fought around that. I'm also not really necessarily MacGuffin oriented, where it's that one thing they got to find, like the Infinity Stones or the Cosmic Cube. That's actually an Infinity Stone, so I'm sort of cheating there by saying that one. Or, you know, the Magic Ring in Lord of the Rings. Those are things I moved away from in my fantasy to try to make it different. Okay, moving on to additions. You know, what could I do differently that is maybe adding something new? So, and I should preface this with saying that I'm not saying that I'm doing something that nobody else is doing. I'm just thinking more in terms of, you know, traditional epic fantasy, and as I've read it, typically you don't see multiple worlds in the same story arcs. Although, you know, Sanderson's doing something kind of exciting with Cosmere. I'm not exactly sure how all that stitches together just yet. I haven't gone that far into his work, but that's something to keep an eye on. He's a very interesting writer. But I wanted my stories to take place across multiple worlds, and I thought that was a really kind of fun addition to epic fantasy writing. Another thing is I use multi-protagonist short form. That's just something I made up in terms of how to describe it. If you're familiar with the structure of Game of Thrones, the story is told through the viewpoint of multiple characters. And those chapters can run, you know, 4 to 8, 12 pages. It tends to be a longer format. It's an 800 something page book, and rich full chapters dedicated to a single character and you get their viewpoint. In this shorter form that I created, it's the same type of approach, but it's just a much shorter chapter. So it's not quite as intimate with the character, but things move maybe along at a faster pace. And that's kind of what I was going for there. So that's something, a way that it's a little different. I'm also mixing genres with sci-fi and fantasy. You start to see a lot more of this with newer writers, but I thought that would be a lot of fun. You know, it's like you have your sword and sorcery type of epic fantasy, and then you have your hardcore science fiction. So you might see a story with, androids and barbarians in the same book. Actually, that's going to happen in book 4. So that much I will kind of reveal there. Okay, let's try to sum up this blue ocean strategy idea. Basically, the idea of developing your own voice, your own type of fiction, if that's possible. It's looking for those opportunities where the stories you write are different from anything else that someone else might be putting out there. That's kind of a tall order. I mean, I don't mean it in the sense of like you wrote something that nobody could ever write, or, I mean, all right, maybe that's a good goal to have, but typically what I'm saying is it bucks the mainstream, to some degree. It's not that other writers haven't done so as well, because they probably have. I mean, you can think of something, chances are someone has already kind of come up with something like that. Dragon Riders of Pern was a good example of a book I hadn't read till recently, and lo and behold, there's commonality between how Anne McCaffrey, dealt with dragons and how I did. And I thought that was real interesting. Great book, by the way. It's kind of a tough read, but I do recommend it. But the point is you look at a lot of different influences and try to imagine how your book and your concept for epic fantasy or sci-fi or whatever genre you're working in is just a little bit different from all the other people. And you do that by adding and subtracting things that might be present or not present in other works. If you do enough of that and you're aware of it, then pretty soon you'll have your own thing. And in the blue ocean strategy that means you have a bigger market to yourself instead of competing with everybody else. That's going to do it for this episode, and I hope this was instructive. Just give you a little inspiration on how to pull in different influences. In this case, it was a business book, and I'll go ahead and hold that up one last time here. Blue Ocean Strategy gave me ideas about how I could approach epic fantasy and science fiction differently. So if you liked the video, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.